Hello and welcome to the Sharpening Report. I'm your host, Josh Peck. We have a very special returning guest today. I'm very excited for today's program. We welcome back to the show Dr. Ken Johnson. Ken, how are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, anytime, absolutely. Well, you got a new book out, which it's funny the way this worked out because we didn't plan this or anything. But your book and I just put out a 2 volume set on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and our books came out like at a really similar time, and both on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I'm really excited about yours. I've read it through. It's amazing. One of your best, in my opinion. It's called Ancient Prophecies from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And that's going to be the topic of today's show for everybody that's watching. So let's start with, actually, where you start off in the book, the Essene community and how the discovery of the scrolls was actually predicted. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. In Isaiah chapter 29, it talks about a time when Israel comes back. And it starts off just real briefly. God is angry with Israel, and then he sides with the invading forces and obliterates Israel. Well, that has to be 70 AD. And then all of a sudden it kind of switches. It doesn't tell you it's switching, but you know how prophecy is. But all of a sudden now the Lord is bringing him back. He's angry with the other guys. They're going to attack Israel, but the Lord wipes them out like it was a bad dream, just like in a second. So it's obviously 2 separate wars. So if it was 70 AD when they left, it has to be 1948 when they come back. And then it says in that time period when they come back and the war happens and is over in just a matter of days, the old ones begin to speak out of the dust of the earth. And so if you take that literally and know the history of the scrolls, where the main professor had to wait for funding to go buy the first scroll, finally got enough money, went down to buy the first scroll, which happened to be the great Isaiah scroll where that prophecy is at, and then realized that morning he bought it and he started to go back to the university with it and found out he couldn't get there because of apparently not being into politics. He learns later that Israel declared itself to be a nation and the war started. So, I mean, you can't get closer than that within a single day. So it's an amazing story that they tell, a historical story. But with that in mind, then Isaiah 29 is telling us at a certain point, the old ones would begin to speak, and we would have at the very least history, if not other prophecy. And apparently we should pay attention to it, much like Daniel says in chapter 11 and 12, that knowledge will increase in the last days.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point in history, and a lot of people look to that time to as sort of like that's where the countdown, for prophetic things begins, and like that's where like the end, almost like that's where the end times, where like the last part of our age or something. We can look to Israel for these things. Do you agree with that? Do you think that 1940? Do you think that that time was really significant prophetically, where we could look at that and see like, okay, now we can really start counting down the time till the Lord's return?
Yeah, I think so. We can't really set a date per se, but at the same time, there's all these points of generations and jubilees. They have their own calendar system. And the church fathers, when you plug in the church fathers that are not connected at all with the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when you plug them in, they have records of the school of the prophets, the extra biblical writings, who did what. And Irenaeus actually said that the birth pangs time that Jesus talked about starts when Israel comes back. And at that point, knowledge would increase because we would see more and more prophecies fulfilled. So when we're confused at, say, 20 prophecies, and in the next 5 years, 10 of them are fulfilled, and we know exactly what the symbols mean, we should be able to understand the rest of them pretty accurately. So that was kind of a common teaching all the way through the early church.
That's absolutely fascinating. What an exciting time to be alive. And one of the most important things about the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the most fascinating things to me anyway, is, and I know to you too, is the Essene calendar. And you write about that in this book, and you specifically bring up the scroll 4Q252 through 254. What is the Essene calendar, and what did you discover about it, and what if anything does it say about our time today?
Well, basically, it's the same calendar in the Bible. And of course, I can't verify this because I'm not 2,000 years old, but their concept is God gave a calendar, kind of like in Genesis when it says, observe the seventh day Sabbath and keep the cycle going. It's a calendar type thing. And so their idea is that creation started on the fourth, or the creation week rather. The fourth day of that week is when the sun, moon, and stars were created. And that's when you can start a calendar count. So their New Year's always starts on a Wednesday, and they say that the weeks were never altered. So theoretically, our Sabbath Saturday is still Saturday. So, and again, I can't really prove that, but that's what they teach. And they basically started going through beginning to beginning. They would mount years to Shemitahs, to Jubilees, to Onas, to ages, and they have this count. And the neat thing about it is they have in 11Q 13, it talks about the Melchizedekian priest, who is God incarnate, would come and pay some sort of penalty to erase the debt of our iniquities. And that somehow reconciles us to God and starts the age of grace. And it says that this time period, or the event, whatever the event is that takes this, and of course we know that to be his death on the cross, but the event is one Shemitah after the end of the ninth Jubilee of their Ona in that age. And so if you plug that into our calendar, it comes out to 32 AD, give or take a year, but so I'm not arguing dates per se, but that's pretty accurate. And that gives us an idea of the end of our age as being 2075. So we're getting ready to enter that last Jubilee in about a year and a half. So that's when time really comes up. In the book, I also have several quotes where they talk about the idea that um, at during the middle time period, just in general, not too many prophecies are fulfilled. But when you near the end of an age, especially, or sometimes even the end of a jubilee period, you have a lot more prophecies fulfilled. And so that's why I was guessing, we probably wouldn't see much of anything until at least 2 years from now. And I was wrong, happily. But there's a lot of things going on, and not just the Israeli Hamas war and Hezbollah, which are all prophesied in Scripture, and then several other things. But all these things begin a time period, and there's other things in the scrolls too that talk about that.
When we talk about jubilees, is there a difference between a jubilee and a generation, or is the concept of those the same? Is a generation 50 years?
Generally speaking, a generation is from the birth of a person to the birth of their firstborn son. And so, in other words, like if I was a king, I'd be ruling when my firstborn son was born. That begins his generation, and then, or sometimes it's actually when I take over and when he takes over. But generally, it's a generational count, so it's an unknown number of years. If I had a child when I was 15 or when I'm 50, my first, it just all depends. A jubilee is always 50 years, period. But sometimes, depending on the prophecy, there's prophecies about, like in Enoch, it talks about a 70 generational count from Enoch's time to the Messiah. And when we looked that up in Luke, that was exactly correct. Now, I did some math on it, though. I took the time period of its start and its ending, divided it by 50, or no, by 70 for the generations, just to see how many years an average generation is. And it came out to be 48.9 or something like that on average. I thought that was pretty interesting. But sometimes, though, in the text, they will use them interchangeably. And the way you can do this is you can look through the New Testament when it's talking about generations, and then go back, especially if it's quoting an Old Testament one. Go back and look that up, and then flip it over to the Septuagint and see what Greek word is used, and you'll come to find out a lot of times a jubilee is a generation.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So when Jesus says that this generation will not pass, do you think that that's just like it just means that the generation that's alive, there's not going to be a new generation that comes after that before all these things are fulfilled, or do you think that he was speaking about a specific time period?
I've always thought that he just means a general generation like that. So, in other words, there's still someone alive that saw the beginning that will see the end.
Hmm.
So when it starts, for instance, it's not going to last 200 years because nobody would still be around. Um, but then again, what is interesting to me is the rapture hasn't happened yet. Some of the major prophecies, tribulation, Antichrist hasn't happened yet. And if it doesn't happen in the next year and a half, it'll be the same thing. It will be in that last generation or that last Jubilee.
Yeah,
So,
that
it could happen at any time, but to me, it's interesting that they would change those around and it could mean either or.
yeah, that makes sense. And either way we look at it, it really seems like we're heading towards that time now. So the Dead Sea Scrolls were kept by the Zadokian priesthood in Qumran. What set the Qumran beliefs apart from other beliefs at the time, say of the Pharisees and Sadducees and others?
Well, basically, they talked a lot about, well, the idea is that there are just Jews, and basic Judaism is Judaism, the way it has always been taught. And they say they are the real original Jews with the real original theology. So, and what they teach is that there's one God, but somehow he manifests in three forms as Messiah, as Hashem, and as the Ruach HaKodesh. And they're prophets. They know the Holy Spirit very well. So they have that concept. That we have a sin nature. Messiah comes to die for our sin nature. Many texts like that. Like they talk about the fact that the teacher of righteousness came and was killed by an evil priest approximately 40 years before the destruction of the temple. So there's a whole lot of details in there. But that's their theology. And the idea is somewhere along the line, cults sprung up. And so you got Pharisees and Sadducees, and somehow the cults took over the government. So it's much like you and I being a Christian, and we believe that same story about the death, burial, and resurrection of the Messiah, and say there's some Christian cult that doesn't believe Jesus even existed and all this kind of stuff, and somehow they become president, take over the United States, and that's what we would be in that same boat then. It's like, no, we're the real Christians, these guys are cults. And that's their story. Now, of course, the Sadducees and Pharisees would tell the opposite, but what I think is interesting is in the scriptures, we're told that the Sadducees don't believe in spirits. They don't believe in the Holy Spirit. So once you're dead, you're dead. There is no life afterwards. And that's obviously not scriptural. And the Pharisees believed some of that, but not others. And so just by going by the New Testament, which I would as a Christian, I would say all those guys are wrong. And it's fascinating to me because a Jew is today, an Israeli, is taught ignore Christians, they're a cult. The rabbis say totally different story. Okay, so that makes sense. But then you dig up the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are theoretically their great grandfathers, that tell the story. No, we believe just like the Christians. We're waiting for it to happen just like the Christians said it did. And there's going to be an apostasy hit that's going to tell you the opposite. Well, that's the rabbis. So no matter how you look at it, there's two different sides. It's not that Christians invented the New Testament. There's always been these two sides. So you have to decide whether you're going to believe rabbinical Judaism or your great grandfathers. So it's one of those things. And that is an amazing position for the Lord to put them in. Paul says in Romans that eventually all Israel will be saved. So they will become a messianic nation eventually. And I see the Dead Sea Scrolls as playing a major part of that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, for sure. People seem to be waking up more and more to it the more time goes on. One question that I always get a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is why don't we see the word Essene, or why don't we see the Essenes mentioned in the Bible, or are they in the gospel somewhere under a different name? If we were to try to point out where the Essenes are in the Bible, why don't we have that word, and where would we point to show, well, this is what it means? These are the Essenes.
Yeah, well, number one, remember they said that they are the original Jews, and they tend to refer to themselves as Jews. And so that word is all the way through the New Testament. But the thing is, the word Essene is a Greek word that means healer. And that's basically what the Greek people would call them. The Hebrew people would call them the sons of Zadok, or there's the priest, that kind of thing, which is interesting if you think about it. You've got the real Zadok priests that are supposed to be ruling, and you've got this cult that comes up that takes over. So what do? They call themselves Sadducee or Zadaki, trying to convince people they are the real Zadok priests and not. So you see that kind of stuff in there. So other than that, it's not mentioned a whole lot because I think mainly when you give a name to someone, you're doing it because there's a problem. We're all Jews. We're waiting for Messiah. That's all we need to know, except that nut over there. So we got to give him a name, a Sadducee, a Pharisee, a Samaritan. Samaritans might be nice people, but they only took like the first 5 books of the Old Testament. They reject everything else. Okay, they're nuts. It's just, so we're going to call them this name, we're going to call them that name, not in a bad way, but just to label them. So you've got this, but you've got a lot of Essenes. For instance, in Acts chapter, I think it's chapter 13, it's when the prophets came down from Antioch to lay hands on Barnabas and Paul and anoint them for ministry. It says that there were 3 major guys that came down. One of them was in our Bible, it says Manian, who was the Manian who was with Herod in his household. Okay, so that tells us everything we need to know. The Hebrew way of saying that name is Menachem, and there's a whole history of Menachem the Essene, how he ran the Sanhedrin, and then when they began to apostatize, he said, "No, I'm keeping the original teaching, and I leave." And so they call him a heretic. He leaves and kind of disappears, and that's when Hillel takes over. So Hillel and Shammai, 2 of the main famous rabbis. But what happens is, of course, he's a Christian. He's waiting, and he comes down at this point. He's got to be at least in his 90s or 100, 102, something like that, at least, to anoint Paul, coming down from Antioch all the way to Jerusalem. And it's interesting because they're called Essenes, meaning healers, but they have this concept that if you do the herbal medicine and you have a simple lifestyle and you dedicate yourself to the Lord, you normally live to be 120. That's just kind of standard. Almost all of them do. The Pharisees and Sadducees might live to be 70 or 80 if they have a really cushy, place and lots of good food and that kind of stuff. The average Gentile lived to be about 60 back in that day, is from what we understand. So you've got this 90-year-old guy hopping on a donkey and coming all the way down here to anoint Paul. And it's just interesting to see that. He's got to have an Essene diet. He's got to have a long lifespan. He's filled with the Holy Spirit. So obviously he's a Christian. Otherwise he wouldn't be filled with the Spirit and still prophesying. And so that goes along with what the church fathers say about after the coming of Messiah. Doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile, but you have to be a believer in Messiah to experience the gifts. So that's just one example, but there's others in there, and I think we get stuck on the names sometime. Scribes, by the way, is there's a couple of different kinds of scribes. Some scribes might be referring to Essenes. Other scribes are the ones that just write court documents, scribes. And then there was a scribal group or denomination that I thought was fascinating because the Pharisees said we're going to follow this oral Torah. And the Essenes would say oral Torah is junk because we have the writings of the patriarchs. So we're following patriarchal history in the Old Testament. The scribes, on the other hand, said we're not going to take sides in that. So we're not going to look at any history, any theology. We're just going to read the Bible and take wild guesses on what we think it means. And I thought it's interesting when you look at it like that, Jesus was always yelling at the scribes and the Pharisees, they're hypocrites. And you can see why. It's like you're trying to teach real history, teach everything correctly, but you don't want to look at history and add it to the Bible or anything like that. So it's really interesting to see. And we kind of have that parallel today in our society. People will say, well, let's not look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's not in the Bible, but it's mentioned. It's part of history. It's kind of important.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and yeah, it is important. And also, if it was included in the Bible would be so big nobody would have the time to read it. I mean,
Right.
it's already hard enough to even get Christians to read the Bible with the length. Imagine if it was twice or 3 times the size. Something that the Dead Sea Scrolls do, which is really interesting, is they provide commentaries on biblical texts that we're familiar with, and in some of those commentaries, there's a lot of prophecy that can be found. And you dedicated a whole section of your book to prophetic commentaries. I'd love to go through some of these and just have you talk about what you found in these commentaries that really stuck out. So let's start with the Genesis commentary. What's in there, and what stuck out to you prophetically?
Well, number one, they go through and they give us chapter 7 of Genesis, the flood account and everything, but they will plug in the actual dates. Our Genesis says that the flood occurred on the 17th of the second month in the 600th year of Noah's life. So that's ER 1656 on the calendar. But they would actually go so far as to say, well, that day was Sunday, and it was this, and it was that. So they give you all the days of the week, all that kind of stuff. If their calendar is correct, and that's the one that has always been used, those dates would be absolutely correct. So it's really neat to see that kind of stuff. And when you look at prophecies and comments and other scriptures, that corroborates it. So, for instance, I've always wondered when Jesus said something happens and 3 days later this other thing happened, why does it say 3 days later? Because I have no clue when it started. There's no way I could figure out when it happened. It's a waste of time. There's no way to figure it out. If you use the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, you'll know exactly what day it is. If it's a festival or if it's close to a Sabbath or whatever, it just clicks. And so it makes sense because the scripture wouldn't add other stuff like that. But there's prophecies about the Messiah, the one that would do different things. And we look at those as Christians, like in Genesis, and say, well, that's obviously a prophecy about the Messiah. Modern day Judaism would say, no, it means something else. And you got the Dead Sea Scrolls saying, nah, it means Messiah. And that's what's fascinating about all of these things.
Yeah, I agree. The calendar to me is really fascinating because you can take that calendar and apply it from Genesis to Revelation. I mean, even the prophetic day counts fit within this calendar. Since it came up, I should mention too for people at home, if you want a print version of this calendar, Dr. Ken Johnson and I do have that available. You can go to his website, BibleFacts.org, or you can go to DailyRenegade.com to get that, or you can just click on the link in the description below. But it's the Dead Sea Scroll calendar with all of the festivals and feasts. Ken put the whole thing together. All I did was just put it into print form. But it also has our regular calendar attached to it, so you can compare like today's date and see if today falls on a feast day, or you can, if a major event happens in Israel, if they start a war or something, or well, they don't really start wars, but if they, if a battle happens or something, you can you can look at that date and see, okay, this is on this festival. And it also has all the new festivals too that most of us don't know about. In Leviticus, we have 7 of them mentioned, but in the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are as many as 12 from what it appears, which actually, it kind of makes more sense because there's prophecies about like time, and half a time. And that is, that's the word Moedim. It means a festival cycle. Well, if it's only 7, how do you have half of 7? It's either going to be 3/4 or 4/3. You can't really have half. If there's 12, you can have exactly half. So for that, if anybody's interested, you can just click on the link in the description below, or go to BibleFacts.org for Ken's website, or go to DailyRenegade.com for mine. And the proceeds go to help both of our ministries. We split everything down the middle, so you're supporting two great ministries with that. Okay, so. And these commentaries are really fascinating because they do talk a lot about their time and prophecies they were looking forward to, but also some in our time too. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about our time from there's a bunch of commentaries. We wouldn't have time to go through all of them. There's probably at least a dozen or more here in your book. And the way the book's laid out for everybody at home, it's really easy to read. Like Ken will actually, he puts the actual section of the Dead Sea Scrolls and then provides his own commentary and kind of helps explain. So it's really easy to read and really informative. But what are some of the ones that really stuck out to you about our time? What's happening now and what we might be looking forward to in the near future?
Well, in the commentary section, there's some really interesting ones. For instance, I remember going through seminary and we looked at the Valley of Dry Bones, and there were several theories on what it meant. Most of us thought it was prophecy, not resurrection. And some people said, well, it could be 537 BC coming back from Babylon, or 1948, or both. It could just be symbolic, that kind of thing. In the commentary in Ezekiel, though, they have a section on Ezekiel 37. And basically, they have two separate events where the same thing happens. One is when Israel comes back filled with the Spirit, and the other one is when they come back not filled with the Spirit. And so that's pretty obvious because they talk about the fact when they come back under Ezra, Nehemiah, that kind of stuff, they have 11Q13, this concept that the Messiah is God incarnate that dies for their sins. So they're obviously filled with the Spirit. They're following that kind of thing. And when Israel comes back in 1948, they're not messianic. So when you look at that, it's pretty obvious according to that text. Our Ezekiel 37 only has them coming back with not filled with the Spirit. So number one, that tells us that Ezekiel chapter 37 in our Bibles is specifically talking about 1948, period. And I thought that was fascinating. Anytime you can isolate something like that and know for sure, then you begin to see other things instead of speculating on what it might be, or it may prove something else to be wrong. So it's kind of neat to see that, this whole concept, and there's a lot of other things. For instance, in Habakkuk chapter 2, Paul quotes that in 3 places in the New Testament, and he's explaining how the just are saved by faith, not sacrifices, but faith in the Messiah. And he seems to indicate in Galatians that that's how Abraham was saved, by trusting in what the Messiah would do when he comes, however he fixes it. And so modern rabbis would say, no, it's got nothing to do with the Jesus or anything like that. It's just faith in God, that God will take care of things. Well, the commentary specifically says the just live by faith in what the teacher of righteousness will do when he comes. So they make it very, very clear. It can't be faith in potatoes or your church or whatever. It's faith in the Messiah. So again, for us as Christians, it's very clear, but it's an incredible witness to Jews. The just live by faith. You can't live by the law of Moses. I mean, you need to follow that if you're in that culture, but that's not how salvation is based. It's by trusting Messiah. Well, who is Messiah? He's the one that was killed 40 years before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. The one that did these other things, the one that is bringing salvation, that is God incarnate, that does all these things. And so it's repeated over and over again. And there is a ton of first coming prophecies, extra biblical ones, for instance, and then the commentaries on those. And then there are some that are for the second coming, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that because I find that absolutely fascinating too. Before we do, we are going to take a quick break. So everybody just hold on the line. We'll be right back with Ken Johnson. I would ask that you go visit dailyrenegade.com and become a member today. Not only do you get early access to full videos, but there's a lot of things I just can't put out on YouTube for fear that they'll delete videos or delete the entire channel, and I can't put the channel at risk. There are certain things, and those of you who have followed me for a while know, there are certain things that I've made documentaries about that I cannot mention on YouTube, or my entire channel will get removed. A ministry that I previously worked for had this happen recently because of exactly this. So, and I've had this happen multiple times too. So this is why I created Daily Renegade. It's a place where we don't have to worry about censorship. You can go, you can watch all the videos, you can watch the full videos of everything. And there's even a community tab that works pretty much exactly like Facebook without the censorship. So members of Daily Renegade, we can all communicate with each other. You can post, you can put pictures up, you can make your own account. It's really exactly like Facebook. There's just no censorship. Now, again, I do run the site. If I see somebody cussing somebody out, I'm going to remove them. But so far, I have not had one problem with trolls because, let's face it, trolls are pathetic, right? They're not going to spend their own money to go and troll somebody. They'll just do it for free on YouTube. So we'll leave the filth with YouTube. At dailyrenegade.com, we're actually creating something really nice. So the video section works exactly like YouTube. It looks really, really similar. It has the same layout. You get your own profile. You can favorite videos. You can share things. You can comment. I mean, it has the same layout as YouTube. It just does not have the censorship. And it's the same with the community tab. So at dailyrenegade.com, yes, there is a membership fee because there has to be. I'm not rich. I didn't get into full-time ministry to become rich, you know. So I can't afford to do it all on my own. So there is a membership, but that goes towards keeping Daily Renegade afloat. But also it helps with what we're trying to do. We want to make a phone app and a TV app so that Daily Renegade will be even easier to access. Right now, you can go on your phone and just go dailyrenegade.com and it works great. It works beautifully now. We had problems with an earlier website that we went through a different service. We went through Wix, and we got rid of that. That's done. So if you're happening to view this and you're thinking, oh, I remember that site from 2 years ago and it was awful, I couldn't do anything. Please, I'm asking you, give us another chance, because we have fixed all that. We fixed all the junk. It was expensive to do, but it's because of people supporting Daily Renegade, getting memberships, and even donating that we're able to do that. So it works great now, and now we want to take it to the next step. We want to make a phone app, and we want to make a TV app. So dailyrenegade.com is where you can get that. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year, and if you can do it, I suggest doing the $100 a year because it's cheaper in the long run. Essentially, you get 2 months for free. I also want to say, too, that we're still collecting donations. So many of you know the situation. I'll run through it very briefly. Two main things. One, 2 weeks before I got the job offer here for Prophecy Watchers, my wife and I had bought a house in Illinois. And once we got the job offer here, we knew it was a calling from God. We knew it. And so we had to take it. And it's great. I mean, I love working at Prophecy Watchers. I love everybody there. Feels like home, feels like a family. And it is a perfect fit for us. But the problem is we are renting a house here in Oklahoma, but we still have a house that we're trying to sell in Illinois. By the way, if you're in the Decatur, Illinois area and you're looking for a really nice 4-bedroom house, let me know. JoshPeckDisclosure@gmail.com. It's for sale now. But in the meantime, we don't know how long that house is going to sell. And anybody who knows anything about the economy knows this is a really bad time to try to sell a house. So it's been very difficult financially. It's been financially straining. And especially since, Illinois got hit with some storms and we had to pay to fix some damages there and stuff. We've had to put a lot of money into it. So while we're paying for a mortgage there, we're paying for rent at this house. So basically, we got 2 huge payments. And I don't know how long that's going to last. The second our house sells, I will tell everybody on here, okay, we're good. You don't have to donate. Well, you don't have to donate at all, but we no longer need donations for our living situation. So we are accepting donations for that. We're also accepting because we have a big family. We have 5 kids, and we're a single income house. Christina stays at home, takes care of the kids, homeschools them, works really, really hard, and then I do my ministry work at Prophecy Watchers, and then on my off time on that, I work on Daily Renegade stuff. And anything that I make from Prophecy Watchers and Daily Renegade, that's it for our entire family. So once our house sells, it's going to be fine, but we just don't know how long that's going to last. And if that lasts months and stuff, we need some kind of savings. And whatever savings we had before we put into the first house, because we thought, well, there's a whole story behind that, why we had to buy the house otherwise we weren't going to have a place to live for much longer. And there's a whole thing. Nobody was unfair to us or anything like that. Like, just the basic story was, I went to go work for Zach Drew for a while, for about 9 months, and at the time, I wasn't in the best. At the time, we were already dealing with financial problems because of our son's health care, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But so Zach said, well, I actually have a house that I'm trying to sell. You can stay in it rent free up until like this time, but by this time, um, we need to find out if you're going to buy it or if you're going to live somewhere else, or we'll need to figure out what to do because I won't be able to afford to just do that forever. And so that's what it was. So Zach helped us out a lot, but it got to that point, and again, this was 2 weeks before the Prophecy Watchers job offer. So I said, okay, we'll just buy the house from you. We'll make it really easy. You've been really generous. You've been helping us out. We don't have any other place around here where we can rent that can support all of us, so we'll just buy it from you. So we went through that whole process and bought the house. And then, yeah, it was like 2 weeks after that, I got the Prophecy Watchers job offer. And but again, like I didn't move to Prophecy Watchers till months after that. So either way, even if I had gotten the job offer before buying the house, I still would have had to buy the house unless I absolutely wanted to financially ruin my very good friend Zach Drew, and there was just no way I was going to do that to him. So either way, I was going to have to. I was going to buy the house. Zach never told me I had to, but in my mind, I had to, because if I didn't, I would have totally messed up a really good friend, and I wouldn't have had it. There was no other place for me and the family to go, so it just wouldn't have worked. Anyway, so that's just kind of a brief rundown of why we're in the situation we're in. Prophecy Watchers has helped out a lot, but again, we don't know how long this is going to last. So until the house sells, I have to keep bringing it up and say, hey, if you feel led and if you want to donate, that would be extremely helpful. Best place is paypal.me/JoshPeck disclosure. If you don't want to do that, I do have a Cash App. It's $JoshScottPeck. If you want to mail in something, a couple of people have mailed in checks just addressed to me to the Prophecy Watchers building. I don't have the exact address. I think it's I don't know what their PO box is, but I think it's on their website. So if you just want to go to prophecywatchers.com and look where to actually send in and look for a PO box where to send in or an address. I know the physical address of the building, but I honestly don't know if that's been made public, and I don't want to make it public if it hasn't, so I'm not going to do that. Also, we're still accepting donations for my son's healthcare. Very brief synopsis: he had cancer for years. We took him to St. Jude's, got it cured, but the chemo destroyed his immune system, and he's got a lot of long-lasting health issues because of that. So to reverse those health issues, Christina actually got her degree because of this whole thing in natural health and medicine, and so we're going the all-natural route. But that stuff is really expensive. Those treatments, those supplements, and I'm not talking about just supplements off of the shelf of Walmart. A lot of that's garbage and it's not even real. But to actually get the real stuff that your body like needs to heal, it's so expensive, and insurance does not cover it at all. So, and there's also medical treatments and things like that he needs. Very, very expensive, and we're having to pay out of pocket for that. So again, for my family, I don't like having to ask all the time. And I'm not ever going to impose on you that you have to donate. You don't. You really don't. I would love it if you'd at least pray, though. That anybody can do that. If you're watching this video, you can pray. At least pray that, and God has been providing. He's been doing great. But, just pray that continues. Pray for our wisdom. Pray for Nathan's health. Pray for our house to sell. There's a lot of things you can pray for that would help. I don't love having to bring this up every single time, but for my family, absolutely, I'm going to do that. It's especially if you're a man, it's not easy to ask for help. It's not easy to just put your personal details out there and admit when you need help. It's not easy, but I'll do anything for my family, and I'm sure you would too. So yeah, every single time I do this, every single time I get comments, I get emails, I get people that get annoyed that I'm even bringing it up, and I'll get comments that say, "Well, the gospel should be free." The gospel is free. I'm not selling the gospel. I'm not telling you that you have to give anything. You don't. But if you feel led, not just for me, for my family, for my kids, if you feel led, it would be incredibly helpful. And I'm not going to promise that you're going to get anything from it. That's up to God. I'm never going to be the kind of guy that says, sow a seed and if you do this, God will reward you. I don't know what God's going to do. and that shouldn't be why you give anyway. You should never give to get a reward for yourself. If you're giving because you're expecting God to reward you in some way, I'd rather you just not give at all, because that's like spiritually dangerous territory for you to be in, and I would suggest getting some actual good, solid foundational teaching of the teachings of Jesus and what he means when he says when he tells us to give with a cheerful heart and all that stuff. You don't expect things in return. We know that we're getting rewards in heaven. We know all that, but you shouldn't expect anything in return. All it is it's a gift that would really help us out a lot, and if anything, I mean, it helps. It makes it a little easier for me to make these videos. If I don't constantly have this stuff on my mind or have to plan out what we're going to do financially for the next bill, because all that stuff takes time. So I mean, if anything, you'll get more videos, but I'm not gonna say that any promises come from any of that. It's just a nice thing that would help us, and we'd appreciate it. But again, do it if the Lord leads you. If not, no worries. Just pray. If you can pray, that'd be great. So again, paypal.me/JoshPeckDisclosure or Cash App $JoshScottPeck. And we have not set a P.O. box up yet, but we will very soon. I actually just keep forgetting about it because we have so much stuff to do. We have so many things day to day that we have to focus on. We are still in that transition period, but we're getting through it. And actually, it's really been great. I do have some other links and things in the description below. I did recently take part in a webinar that's available or will be available at the end of May, I believe, at paulbegleyprophecy.com, and I talked about upcoming magnetic pole shifts, what that might have to do with prophecy, talked a little bit about geographic pole shifts, how all of this relates to Bible prophecy, a lot of revelation in there. So I'd suggest checking out that webinar, paulbegleyprophecy.com. There's also an Orlando Prophecy Summit that's on demand right now. And if you use the promo code PECKOrlando24, all caps, all one word, and then you'll have full access to all videos and speakers. This is a Prophecy Watchers Conference. And for more information on that, you can go to OrlandoProphecySummit.com or ProphecyWatchers.com. Also, if you haven't had a chance, check out Cornerstone Asset Metals. The economy is not great, and the value of our dollar is dropping by the day. So what we should do is invest in something that's more stable, like silver and gold. But the problem is there's a lot of scammers out there. There's a lot of people you can't trust, even people calling themselves Christians that you can't trust because they mark up their prices. Cornerstone doesn't do that. And if you look at any interview that I have on my YouTube channel and at dailyrenegade.com with Terry Saka, look at any of his interviews. He's a prophecy guy. He's a Nephilim guy like us. He knows all this stuff, and he treats his business as a ministry. He's doing this as a service for brothers and sisters in Christ, especially when their retirement, their 401k, your investments, even just your savings are in danger. So go to cornerstoneassetmetals.com, tell them that we sent you, and you can get a free report. You can ask questions. They're not salesmen. They're not going to be pushy with you. You can talk to them about Nephilim if you want to. They're knowledgeable. They know what they're talking about, and they're not going to scam you. I've been working with them for years. I don't promote very many companies on this channel because of specifically that. I've got to actually really know and believe that and know firsthand that it's a solid company, because I don't want to put all of you at risk. And I fully believe that about Cornerstone. We've talked a little bit about prophecy. We do have a Dead Sea Scroll prophecy calendar, a print calendar that you can put on your wall that tells the regular Gregorian date that we go through, and then has the Dead Sea Scroll prophetic calendar that I talk a lot about in my upcoming books, but also talked about in Lost Prophecies of Qumran. So if you want a print version of that, the link is in the description below. Okay, so I think that's it. All the donation stuff, everything. And again, I apologize that takes a long time to get through sometimes, but again, I'm doing it, especially the donation stuff. I'm doing it for my family. See how fast I whipped through the rest of it? Because that's more, hey, if you want a calendar, buy a calendar. Great. It does help support me, my family, my ministry, helps support Ken Johnson's ministry as well. If you want to trade your 401k or your retirement into silver, I think it's a very, very, very smart thing to do. I think you should do that. But again, it's just what won't you do for your family? If I have to deal with some mean comments of people saying that, oh, he's just money grubbing, and no, I'm not. You don't have to give me anything. You don't got to buy anything. I'm still going to be putting free information out on YouTube. But if I have to deal with that, and then the good-hearted uh, people of you who feel God calling you to give, and you do give, and that helps my family, of course I'll go through that. It's very, very minor persecution, compared to stuff that other Christians are going through today. It's very, very minimal. All I have to do is just not read the comments, which typically I don't on YouTube. But that's the reason. It's just I'll do anything for my family, and this is one way that'll help. So okay, let's get back into it. Okay, we are back. I want to ask about some of the second coming prophecies. Before I do, though, where can people pick up your book and follow you online?
All my books are on Amazon. If you go to my website, BibleFacts.org, you'll be able to click on links and buy them directly from Amazon. Saves me the trouble of shipping and everything. So we've got, I think, 34 books total. On the Dead Sea Scrolls section, I think we have about 6 or 7. But I'm at BibleFacts.org. And on Monday nights, I teach on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel. Again, the links are all there on the website. So we're doing really good. We're going through studying Enoch at the moment. We're almost finished with that, looking at some of those prophecies.
Excellent. And if anybody's interested in mine, the best place to get them is prophecywatchers.com. By the time this airs on YouTube, they should have the books in. They just put in an order with me, so I think it takes a week or two for them to get them. But if you're viewing this at dailyrenegade.com, I'm not sure that the books are there yet. They are on Amazon, but if you want, if you can wait, I would suggest that you wait and get them at Prophecy Watchers, because why support Jeff Bezos when you can support an awesome prophecy ministry and help them out? I will say, though, if you want the audiobook or the Kindle, I think that is only available on Amazon for mine. So, and then my new books, it's a 2-volume set. It's Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's up there as well, which reminds me, I gotta put up a banner on my website for that as well. Well, okay, we're going to go to members only, and then I want to talk about prophecies relating to the second coming and then some other stuff as well. So again, for all of you out there, I said it in the break, but I'll just repeat it again. If you want to become a member, it's $10 a month or $100 a year at dailyrenegade.com, which goes to support what we're doing at Daily Renegade. We do that because of censorship issues. I already dealt with all that in the break, so I'm not going to rehash that. So we will, if you're a member, you don't have to do anything. Just keep watching. And if you are viewing on YouTube or Rumble, don't forget to subscribe. And if you believe you're subscribed, double check, because I've had a lot of people contact me and say that YouTube has been unsubscribing them from my channel. So double check, make sure you turn the bell on for all notifications. And until next time, take care and God bless.